The beaches of Kerala, one of India's most popular travel destinations. But beyond just the tourism they bring in, there's something special about them. More specifically about these sands. These sands are part of a story. The story of a young man with a nuclear ambition. The story of a newly independent young nation that wanted to eat lunch with the cool kids, aka the nuclear superpowers. This is that story. It's got a little bit of history, geopolitics, and of course some science. So strap in your seatbelts as I take you on this journey. My name's Pranav and you're watching Science is Dope. Let's begin. This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Nas.io, and YouTube. If you wish to support me, you can find the links below. World War II, 1945. The world witnessed the most destructive event in history, the dropping of the nuclear bombs over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation caused by not just the bombs themselves, but even the radioactivity and other consequences that remained in people's minds ever since. The event caused the surrender of Japan, thus bringing an end to World War II. But there was one more thing that the world also saw. The energy produced by the entire bomb was only due to the nuclear reaction of less than 1 kilogram of uranium. Just imagine the energy potential inside the nucleus of a uranium atom. Scientists all over the world were thinking of only one thing. Is there a way we can safely and slowly release all that energy trapped inside a uranium nucleus? That could take care of the world's energy needs. But how do we make it happen though? How about we build a huge building to contain the uranium where we could allow the nucleus inside the atoms of the material to undergo a spontaneous process of fission where the uranium nucleus would split, releasing a lot of energy. And thus, the idea of nuclear reactors was born. As scientists were busy improving and optimizing the idea of reactors, what was happening back home in India? World War II also foiled the plans of Homi J. Bhabha. You see, he was an established physicist working on cosmic rays in Cambridge, England. He had come to his home country of India for a vacation, but when the war broke out, he couldn't travel back to England. He had no choice but to continue his work in India. But unknown to him, this decision would make him one of the most important scientists in India. 1947, India attained independence from the British, but the nation was left in an economically underdeveloped state with most of its industries being small scale. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, was looking for the best and fastest way of developing the country so that it's at par with the Western nations. And that's when he got a letter from a scientist called Homi Jahangir Bhabha, which said that if India had any chance of becoming a developed nation, then nuclear energy was our best shot. In 1948 August, Nehru set up the Atomic Energy Commission of India with Bhabha as its chairman. And Bhabha was a management genius who inspired many people to work for him. He established the Atomic Energy Establishment, a nuclear research facility in Trombay, which was renamed after Bhabha himself as the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. 1955 saw the setting up of the UN Conference of Peaceful Uses of Atomic Energy with Bhabha, who was elected as its president. He used this opportunity to persuade countries like Canada, the UK, and France to assist India in its nuclear energy program. UK helped India build its first reactor called Apsara, which was constructed at Trombay. Canada gave India Cyrus, and France gave it Zerlina. All three were research reactors constructed at BARC. Commercial production of electricity from nuclear energy hadn't started in the country yet. But by this time, Bhabha had made a plan for that too. A plan for how India could exploit its own nuclear resources and build its own nuclear reactors. And that is where the sands of Kerala come into the story. You see, at the time, uranium, the main nuclear fuel for reactors, was scarce in India. And if you tally up all the uranium mines from all over India, it'll amount to less than 1% of the world's reserves. But we had 25% of the world's reserves of another element, something that could be used instead of uranium in nuclear reactors, something that could be mined from the sands of not just Kerala, but beaches all over South India. And that was thorium. Thorium was not a very cheap alternative, but it was safer, way more efficient, and as far as India was concerned, extremely abundant. In fact, if India were to use all its thorium efficiently, that would meet the energy needs of the entire country for several centuries. So this was a no-brainer decision for Baba. Whatever plan he made must be based on efficiently utilizing India's thorium reserves. But there was a catch. Thorium was not fissile, meaning it could not be directly used in a nuclear reactor. See, there are two types of nuclear fuel, fertile and fissile. Only something that's fissile can be used in a nuclear reactor. For example, uranium has two types, U-238 and U-235. They both differ in the number of neutrons in their nucleus. U-235 is fissile, but U-238 is fertile. Put U-235 in a reactor and it will spontaneously undergo nuclear fission reaction and split and produce a lot of energy. It also produces neutrons on undergoing fission, which can smash into another nucleus and hence keep the reaction going. A U-238 nucleus cannot do this on its own. However, if a neutron were to strike a U-238 nucleus, it absorbs that neutron and then undergoes spontaneous beta decay twice to become an atom of plutonium-239, and this is now fissile. Put plutonium-239 in a reactor and it will undergo fission just like U-235. So what's the difference between fertile and fissile? Fissile stuff can be directly used as fuel for a nuclear reactor. Fertile stuff must be made fissile, usually by bombarding it with a neutron before using it in a nuclear reactor. Now, I've given you a brief overview of nuclear fission, but there's so much more I can talk about, like neutron bombardment, controlling and moderating nuclear reactors, and why India chose a specific nuclear reactor design that was different from what was popular in other countries to harness energy from uranium. But I've chosen not to include it in this video, but instead I've included it as a members exclusive, which you can access by joining the connoisseur tier or above. More about it at the end of the video, but check out my new membership benefits on Patreon and YouTube. I've revamped them, link below. Back to the video. So where does thorium lie in all this? Thorium is fertile. It has to be converted to uranium-233, which is fissile. And how do you do that? By bombarding it with a neutron. So Baba knew that to make thorium usable in a reactor, you need a source of neutrons, which is one of these three fissile nuclei. But this one comes only from thorium, so we can't really use that. And plutonium doesn't occur naturally. It has to be made from uranium-238. So that only leaves uranium-235. It occurs as a small fraction of natural uranium, which is 0.7% U-235 and 99.3% U-238. That's too small to be used in a reactor. There was this process called enrichment, which got this percentage of U-235 up to 3 to 5%, and now this could be used in a reactor, but enrichment was very expensive, and once that 3 to 5% nuclear fuel was used up, the rest of the fuel was radioactive nuclear waste. Baba knew that India could not afford to waste a resource it had precious little of. He needed to find a way to get more fissile material before using the thorium. Fortunately, he had one other option, a special reactor design that could use natural uranium without enriching it. Baba decided to use this design in the first stage of his three-stage plan. The first stage reactor will generate power using natural uranium, and it will also generate plutonium-239 from the U-238 used, which, if you remember, is also fissile. And this generated plutonium would serve as a fuel for the second stage in Baba's plan. Now, Baba needed to increase the amount of fissile fuel we had before using thorium, considering we had so little of it. So the next stage in his plan was a reactor that could create more plutonium than it consumed, aptly called a breeder reactor. A reactor that could produce electricity while breeding plutonium. The starting fuel was plutonium, but the plutonium core would be surrounded by U-238, which could absorb neutrons from the core and turn into more plutonium-239. Now with this massive pile of plutonium-239, we could go into the third stage of the plan, a thorium reactor. This would also be a breeder reactor like before, and once again this stage will have a core of plutonium. The blanket would be made of thorium. It would absorb the neutrons from the reaction and get turned into uranium-233, which, if you remember, is fissile. And once the plutonium core is used up, we could begin using U-233 as the core with more thorium blanket around it, generating even more U-233, which can be used in the core again. In fact, this reactor is completely self-sustaining, and once we have it, we don't need the first two stages anymore. And if this plan is executed perfectly and all the fuel is used very efficiently, you can make an argument that India will have nuclear power for 100,000 years. To put this in perspective, let's say we have reactors that can generate 500 gigawatts of electricity, which it can do easily. India's current installed capacity for electricity is 442 gigawatts from all sources. You can see how nuclear power is going to play a major role in India's goal of being carbon neutral by 2070. Back to the story. Baba presented this plan in 1954, and in 1958, the government of India adopted this as its official plan for nuclear energy. With the help of the Geological Survey of India, the Atomic Energy Commission established a mining company called Indian Rare Earths Limited with its first unit in Kochi, Kerala, for mining monazite, an ore of thorium. Soon, India began building reactors at a commercial scale. The Tarapur atomic reactor, with the help of the General Electric Company from the US, began construction in 1964, and the Rajasthan Atomic Power Station, with the help of Canada, began construction in 1967. These were to deliver commercial electric power to India. Everything was looking bright for India. More than enough nuclear fuel to power the country, a perfect plan to utilize that fuel, and the cooperation from other nations to help India's nuclear program get going. What could go wrong? Well, something did. Because if you look at the electricity sector in India today, less than 2% of the power is generated from nuclear energy. And if you look at India's three-stage plan, guess where we are? Where do you think it is? Somewhere in the third stage? Nope. Forget thorium reactors. We're not even operating the first fast breeder reactor of the second stage. We've only just finished our very first FBR, and even that hasn't started operation. It just finished loading its fuel sources below. For a plant set forth in 1954 and 70 years later today, we're not even half done. It's pretty safe to say things are extremely delayed. So what went wrong? 11th of December 1971. The Indo-Pakistani War was in full swing. Pakistan was almost about to suffer defeat at the hands of India, which is when the United States, the then former allies of Pakistan, took action. They sent the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise into the Bay of Bengal. This was a moment of sheer panic for India, as it couldn't stand a chance in a battle where the militarily stronger US was involved. But there was someone coming to India's rescue, the USSR, who sent a submarine armed with nuclear weapons. When the US saw this, they backed down. India was watching all this unfold and had realized the power of nuclear weapons. It wasn't its potential for destruction that made nukes so dominant. It was its power of deterrence. India did not want this power of destruction, but it wanted that power of deterrence, especially considering it had two enemies that it shared borders with, China and Pakistan. But how did India even get to this point? It was the early 1960s. Along with the commissioning of their individual nuclear programs for power generation, some countries would also test nuclear weapons. By 1967, 5 nations had made it clear that they had nuclear weapons: the US, the USSR, the UK, France, and China. Everyone in the world was aware of the potential of destruction that nuclear weapons had, and as a result, a treaty was negotiated and brought into effect. A treaty to end the spread of nuclear weapons, a treaty for peace, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. According to this treaty, no new country could test weapons after January 1st, 1967. The countries that already had them, aka nuclear weapon states, will prevent the spread and sharing of nuclear weapons technologies and designs, and they will work towards disarmament themselves through peaceful negotiations. India found this a bit unfair. Disarmament through peaceful negotiations? Why such weird wording? If the treaty is aimed at achieving disarmament, why not clearly state it instead of this kind of ambiguity? India did not sign the treaty, and its reasoning was that all the treaty was doing was creating two groups of countries, one that had nuclear weapons and one group containing all the rest of the countries. India did not sign the treaty not because it wasn't committed to non-proliferation. It definitely was. But this treaty did not have the goal of getting rid of all nuclear weapons as a clear objective. India considered it a flawed treaty. India did not sign the treaty because it was unfair, especially for a country that had two neighbors with which it had conflicts in the past, one of which was a recognized nuclear weapons state. When there were these threats present, India could not sign the treaty and let itself be vulnerable. But there was one part of the treaty that India should have paid more attention to, the part calling for peaceful uses of nuclear energy. This called for international cooperation between all signed parties to build up their country's nuclear power and electricity generation programs. This meant the ability to trade on the international market nuclear materials such as fuel and reactor designs and expertise. India should have paid attention to this because international cooperation was crucial for the initial stages of India's nuclear power program, which was already starting to take some huge hits by this point. The first of these blows came in May 1964. Nehru, who was a fierce supporter of India's nuclear power program, died of a heart attack. The next blow to the power program came less than 2 years later in January 1966, when a plane carrying Dr. Baba and 116 other passengers crashed into a mountainside in France. Nobody survived. The man who was responsible for India's nuclear program was no more. The duo that spearheaded India's nuclear energy aspirations was no more. Nehru was succeeded by Lal Bahadur Shastri, Baba by Vikram Sarabhai, and Shastri died in office succeeded by Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi. This was a bit of a weird phase where not much happened. Sarabhai, if you remember, was the man behind India's space program, and he shifted the focus onto space, and not a lot happened in India's nuclear energy program. After his death in 1971, H.N. Setna became the head of the Indian nuclear program. This was also around the time when the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971 ended, the events of which I described in the beginning of this section. India was in a very precarious position regarding its security and its position on nuclear weapons testing. All eyes were on two people in charge of the direction of India's nuclear future, Indira Gandhi and H.N. Setna. What decision did they make to test or not to test? That was the question. 18th May 1974, India explodes its first nuclear device at a military test range in Pokhran, Rajasthan. The entire operation was carried out in extreme secrecy, with even the defense minister and external affairs minister being informed only a couple of days prior to the test. The device exploded had a plutonium core, with the plutonium for the device coming from a research reactor supplied by Canada, Cyrus. And Canada felt extremely betrayed by this and immediately withdrew all support and assistance for ongoing projects. One of the units of the Rajasthan Atomic Power Station, a collaboration with Canada, stopped construction indefinitely. And even though India maintained that the explosion was only a peaceful nuclear test, the international community did not see it that way and reacted by immediately imposing trade sanctions on India. The trade of any material, even remotely associated with nuclear technology, became hard to come by. You could say that these actions almost killed India's nuclear power program. The period also saw great political instability in India. I'm sure you're well aware of how PM Indira Gandhi imposed an emergency, cancelling the elections and suspending all civil liberties. And even though the emergency was lifted 2 years later and the elections were held again, Indira Gandhi lost, and it was Morarji Desai who came into power. Him and his government was opposed to all nuclear technology, and India's nuclear program, even whatever was in progress, was completely stalled for the rest of the 70s. There were minor developments after that, but nothing major until 1995 when PM Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister. He ordered nuclear tests using stockpiled fissionable material that India had from its existing reactors. But the preparation for these tests was picked up by American spy satellites, and with pressure from the then US President Bill Clinton, the tests did not progress. In 1998, Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power and he was a strong advocate of nuclear power and wanted to improve India's nuclear arsenal and declare India's might to gather respect. Soon after assuming power in March 1998, Vajpayee organized a discussion with Abdul Kalam and Chidambaram to conduct nuclear tests. On 20th March 1998, he asked to make preparations for a test. And this time, India was prepared. They were aware of the capability of the United States spy satellites in detecting India's preparations. Therefore, the tests were carried out in extreme secrecy. For example, most of the work was carried out at night. The equipment was returned to its original place during the day to give the impression that it was never moved. Cables and sensors were either covered with sand or concealed using native vegetation. The people involved were given pseudo names and they traveled in smaller groups to avoid detection. And this time, it worked. On 13th of May 1998, Vajpayee made an announcement.
Today, at 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran range.
After these tests, India declared that it will completely stop any further testing, stating that it will never participate again in any nuclear arms race, thus showing its commitment to non-proliferation. But the damage was already done. The international community imposed further sanctions on India, severely crippling its already crippled civilian nuclear program. The dream Homi Bhabha had of harnessing almost infinite thorium power from the sands of Kerala died right there. Or did it? What happened after this point? Did India manage to climb out of the pit it had dug for itself? On March 2, 2006, Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and US President George Bush made an announcement.
I am particularly pleased that we have reached an understanding on the implementation of our agreement on civil nuclear cooperation.
India had kept its word after the second set of nuclear tests at Pokhran and had not conducted any more tests and had no plans to conduct any future ones. The US had seen India's commitment towards non-proliferation despite not having signed the NPT. And as a result, India-United States Civil Nuclear Agreement came into effect in 2008. Following this, the international community's cooperation towards India regarding nuclear materials also improved. This international community, controlling the trade of nuclear materials called the Nuclear Suppliers Group, granted the waiver to India on September 6, 2008, allowing it to access civilian nuclear technology and fuel from other countries. And in return, India accepted IAEA safeguards. In other words, it agreed to the inspection of its reactors as part of the International Atomic Energy Agency's nuclear proliferation prevention. Let me show you some stats. Nuclear power generation in India has gone up significantly after the Indo-US nuclear deal. If you look at this graph, you'll notice how there's an inflection point in 2008, after which nuclear power production starts growing much faster. Today, after just 1.5 decades, India has nearly tripled its energy and power production from nuclear sources. I happened to watch this speech by Anil Kakodkar and it filled my heart up with joy.
There are units under construction which will add roughly an equivalent capacity. It's only a matter of time when these projects get completed and the capacity will reach 13,000 megawatts. And then there is recently government had sanctioned 10 700 megawatt units in fleet mode. And that work is going on. And along with that, 2 VVR units were also sanctioned. By 2031, one should expect the capacity to reach 22,480 megawatts.
Let's look at that table. Even though as of today, India has only 7 gigawatts of operational capacity, it's planning to rapidly increase its generation capacity of nuclear energy. India plans to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, and nuclear energy is going to play a huge role in that because it's completely emissions free. The only waste from nuclear fuel is radioactive nuclear waste, and that tends to be very high for reactors running on enriched uranium. But India's plan has always been to reduce nuclear waste instead by using natural uranium in pressurized heavy water reactors. The waste coming out of such a reactor can be reprocessed and used for fission again. Watch.
So for us, spent fuel is not a waste. For us, spent fuel is a resource. We will reprocess that 1 ton waste, and around 95 to 98% is uranium and plutonium, which will all recycle. So my waste has become just 2% to 5%.
As for Homi Bhabha's 3-stage plan, it remains as relevant as ever. What is its progress today? Well, after several delays, the prototype fast breeder reactor, the first reactor of the 2nd stage, is about to begin operation. But at the rate I see things happening, I think such long delays are only a thing of the past. Let's look forward to the 3rd stage being up and running soon. I find myself thinking about what Bhabha would say if he were alive today. Would he have focused on power production or on nuclear weapons? Given the geopolitical climate of that day and the pressure to be a nuclear superpower, I'm not sure he would have decided any differently. But I am sure of one thing. He would have wanted to see his thorium dream come true. The whole country running on energy from the sands of Kerala. I consider myself lucky because I get to wake up every day and do what I love. Write videos like these that inspire me, and hopefully they inspire you too, especially if you're watching this part of the video. I want to create a community of people that appreciate science and rationality. Science through videos like these on this channel, and rationality through my second channel, DD Rational. But here's a problem I face. I do YouTube full time, okay? And my income depends solely on my work on YouTube. But the ad revenue I get for a channel my size in India is not nearly enough to sustain this kind of content. And that problem is only gonna get worse because I plan to make these longer form documentary style videos from now because I enjoy making them, and clearly you enjoy watching them too if you're still here. But they take more time and effort, so I won't be able to upload more often, which is a terrible idea when it comes to ad revenue. So one option is to rely on sponsors, but I don't like it because often sponsorships constrain my creative freedom. You want me to make a video criticizing Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev? Well, sponsors don't want to come anywhere near those kinds of videos. Even worse, they might see some religious criticism video on my channel and decide that they don't want to associate with me. I'm not saying I'll never take sponsors. I will, but only if they let me have my creative freedom, which happens very rarely. And I want to make videos that my audience wants to watch, not some video for a brand. The choice I have left is to ask you for support. You can support me if you simply love my content and want to see more of it. Whichever channels you want to support, scienceisdope or DD Rational, it's the same platforms for support, links below. There are 3 ways that you can give me a one-time support. You can find them in the description or in the pinned comment. But what I really want is a predictable monthly income. So if you choose to give me continued support, you will get an even sweeter deal. If you become a member on Patreon or YouTube, in the connoisseur tier or above, not only do you get access to my WhatsApp group, but you get exclusive access to 1 or more companion videos that I release with every main documentary video. I've released 2 videos with this one on the physics of nuclear reactions, how nuclear reactors work and how they harness this energy, and how India made the decision to go with one particular design, and the other on some of the political decisions and stuff that took place in the early years that shaped the future of India's nuclear program. Here's a sneak peek of both those videos. And you can clearly see why fusion gives you more energy when atoms transmute between each other compared to fission. It's because the difference between atoms is much higher. So in effect, whether it's fission or fusion, they're trying to increase their binding energy per nucleon and become more stable. Now, a significant proportion of my research for this video came from this book. It's called Nuclear Power in India, a Critical History by N. Sharma and B. Bannerjee. And this book is extremely critical of how the initial years of the program was handled. And I couldn't really include this in the main video anywhere because it didn't really fit the narrative. But I still wanted to talk about this, so I'll do it over here. Now these companion videos will be every bit as edited as the main videos, and I should probably release them on my main channel, but I won't. As a token of my appreciation, they will be an exclusive to those who support me as a member in the connoisseur tier or above. The people who have already given me support, especially the ones who give me continued support, particularly my high tier patrons, you have my eternal gratitude. With your help, I'll be able to hire more people, hire a team, and make these videos more frequently. That is my aim, and I will always be making these longer documentary style science videos on this channel and rationality based content on my second channel, DD Rational. In addition, I've made some changes to my Patreon and YouTube membership tiers. Check them out and see what you like and if you wanna support me. And if you can't financially support me, that's completely fine. Just share these videos with your friends on WhatsApp or whatever social media you prefer. And I'll see you in the next one. Till then, remember, science is dope.